Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to UUCC, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua. We are a group of spiritual freethinkers who gather to celebrate life, build community, and better the world. Wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. I'm Jill Poremba, your worship associate for today. This morning's preacher is our minister, Eileen Casey Campbell. The service is also being live streamed to our YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, welcome. We invite you to sign the visitor's book in the entryway. And whether it's your first visit or your 1000th, we are glad that you came and that we are finally able to be back inside together. Yeah. I have a few announcements to share with you today. First, please wear a mask. Masks are available for anyone who forgot. We aren't able to sing in unison yet, but humming, dancing, swaying, and other expressions are strongly encouraged. Childcare will be available downstairs by vaccinated volunteers for children who can reliably wear a mask. And next Sunday's service, November 14th, will be virtual on Zoom and back with an in-person option on November 21st. Are there any other announcements for the good of the community? As we prepare to be fully together, I remind you to silence your phones and devices. We now enter a space of worship. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting words as the flame is lit. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs, sign of our quest for truth and meeting, in celebration of the life we share together.
Every land so good to be with you this morning. I want to start off by practicing the kind of informed consent that we teach our children to practice with their sexual health, and we're all practicing with our full-bodied health. You can hear a tickle in my throat. I'm going to let you know that I had a negative COVID PCR test earlier this week, just to ease your minds. And I want to tell you a story. It's a story about my dog and my husband. So my husband, Brian, is an overtired dad who's creeping right up on middle age, and he's always been a creature of great habit and discipline. And consequently, he has a hard 9:30 bedtime. And I am a night owl by nature, but more importantly, I'm an extrovert. I, like the Little Mermaid, want to be where the people are, so I go along with the hard 9:30 bedtime. And before Brian goes to bed every night, he takes the dog outside for one last trip to the bushes so that the dog will sleep all night without needing our assistance in going out before morning. Unfortunately for everybody in this scenario, Pepper, our dog, who is also a creature of great habit and discipline, has a hard 8:30 bedtime. The kids go to sleep. Pepper spends 10 minutes staring at us on the couch, waiting for an invitation to sit beside us that does not come. He goes to lay down on the memory foam dog bed that we bought for him as a consolation prize for not getting to sleep on the couch, and he goes to sleep. So when 9:30 rolls around, Pepper is the picture of passive resistance. Brian says every single night, "Come on, Pep, time to go out." Pep doesn't move a muscle. Brian pats him on the head. "Come on, buddy, gotta go outside." And Pepper opens one eye. Like, "I heard you, but no, thanks, I'm good. I'll wait until 1 hour before you're ready to get up to go outside again." And every single night without fail, Brian has to lift our 65 or 70-pound dog up off the memory foam dog bed and carry him down the stairs to the front yard, just so he can do his business one last time. Pepper's rest is his resistance. In a relationship with a clear power differential, Pepper is reclaiming his time. And I think in some ways, hear me out, this is why we come to church. Because this is a place of rest. This is a place where no work is expected of us. This is a place to lay our burdens down, to refuse to engage in systems that insist we should be always busy, always efficient, always productive. Let our rest here this morning indeed be radically resistant. Welcome, and I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and to dance, sway, hum along to our opening hymn, number 1. May nothing evil cross this door.
May
now it's time for a story. Today's story is entitled The Snowy Nap by Jan Brett. It's one of my favorites. The last ramble around the farm. He did not want to miss a moment. He could barely keep his eyes open as he walked. The hens noticed at once. "Time for Betty bye," they cackled. "It won't be long before you have to hibernate, and our coop will be bedazzled by icicles." In a sleepy daze, Hedgie trundled past the pond. The geese honked. "Goodbye until spring. We'll think of you as we play slip and slide across the pond ice. It is already starting to freeze." Hedgie came to the sheep shed. "Nighty-night," the sheep bawed. One of the sheep had seen hedgehogs on the farm head for the cozy dens year after year as winter arrived. She also was ready to tell Hedgie what he would miss. "I'll soon see the snowmen Lisa makes," she said. The billy goat overheard and crunched across the frozen field to add, "As usual, you will miss winter blue time when the sun sets and the snowy farm appears in every shade of blue." The pig watched Hedgie stop for a big yawn. "Have a good winter's sleep," she oinked. "If only I could save a few snowflakes for you. No two are alike." When the pony trotted up, Hedgie guessed what he wanted to say. "Sleep well," he neighed. "If you hear bells in your dreams, it will be me pulling my sleigh." That was the last straw. "I don't want to sleep all winter like last year," protested Hedgie. "I want to see icicles and snowmen, snowflakes and pond ice. I want to hear sleigh bells." Before Hedgie could yawn again, he decided to turn around and stay up all winter. The night grew frosty cold. Must stay awake, must stay awake, must stay awake to see winter, Hedgie shivered, and his eyes closed. From the farmhouse window, Lisa saw a still shape outside in the cold. "Poor little hedgehog is frozen stiff," she cried. She bundled him up and brought him inside. Lisa put Hedgie in the tea cozy and gave him a spot by the window. "That was a close call," she said. "A snowstorm is on the way. You'd better stay in the house and warm up." To Hedgie's delight, the next morning he saw the world outside, shimmering with snow. The old chicken coop sparkled like a palace. Every day he watched from different windows, and new wintry scenes appeared. The pond froze into a shiny mirror. Lisa twirled on her skates as the goose and gander slid to keep up. To Hedgie's amazement, one day Lisa rolled great balls of snow. Before he knew it, he was looking at his first snowman. He was getting sleepier, but each morning held a new surprise. The little hedgehog was dozing when he heard the tinkling of bells. He tried with all his might and opened his eyes. There was the pony pulling a sleigh. Lisa made a snowball and tossed it in his direction. Kapoof. Hedgie slept later every day. One day he awoke to see flowers of frost decorating his window. The trees looked like lace against the sky. I have truly seen winter, was Hedgie's last thought as he nodded back to sleep. Lisa knew it was time. Leaving the door ajar, she cradled the little hedgehog. "You belong in the wild," she whispered in his ear as she carried him through the drifts. She crouched by his burrow and nestled him inside. "Sweet dreams, little adventurer," she said. Just then, she noticed the front door was swinging on its hinges. Squawks and rumbles were coming from inside. Lisa peered through the doorway and saw animals, higgledy-piggledy, making a commotion in her house. Each one was thinking, "I'll see winter from a nice warm house." "Out, out, out, skedaddle," she laughed. "Don't you know this is not where you live?" Lisa was shooing the last mouse from the house as Hedgie, snug in his burrow, fell into a deep sleep. He was dreaming about icicles and snowmen, snowflakes and pond ice. It was a long, snowy nap.
For anyone who plans to join Nancy in childcare down in the big RE room, you can head that way now.
We are a community that holds one another in our celebrations and in our pain. Please share your joys and sorrows by writing them down on one of the papers you find tucked in your hymnal, placing it in the basket, or by typing them in the chat box in Zoom. Know that whatever your heart is holding today, we are with you.
Our hearts are full today. Together we celebrate with Jane and Hazel, who love their mom and are overjoyed to be here. With Chelsea, who is also happy to be here and celebrating both a band gig and her birthday. Our hearts are with Carrie and her son David, who's lost his job but gained a new one. We lift up happiness for the beautiful new childcare space downstairs, and for the celebration of 2 new babies in our church family, the Cabral family and the Plants. We lift up our celebration for beautiful fall drives and walks that Gigi has taken, and we hold in our hearts Cortland and his son Jack. We hold concern with Dorothy for a Haitian friend hoping for asylum, and one more joy for being together. And even though we've already lifted this joy, we celebrate with Megan her baby boy, Paolo, born on Thursday. And for all these joys and sorrows, and for all those left in the silence of our hearts, I'll drop a pebble into our water. In all your joys and sorrows, know we are with you.
I now invite you into the spiritual practice of generosity. Donations from all of you is the primary way we fund the good work of this congregation. 1/4 of our plate collection this season goes to FoodLink, whose mission is to leverage the power of food to end hunger and build healthier communities. You can give to this morning's offering by placing a cash or a check into the basket, or if you are joining us from home, by visiting canandaiguauu.org/connection/donate, or mailing a check to UUCC at 3024 Cooley Road, Canandaigua, New York 14424. In either case, make a note that your gift is intended for today's offering. We now gratefully accept the offering. I invite you now into a time of centering, followed by some shared silence. So I invite you to get comfortable in your seat. Maybe let your feet find the floor if that feels comfortable to you. Let your shoulders relax and fall away from your ears. And if it feels right, let your eyes fall closed as well. Let's take a deep breath in. This morning's centering words come from Wendell Berry. Whatever is foreseen in joy must be lived out from day to day. Vision held open in the dark by our 10,000 days of work. Harvest will fill the barn. For that, the hand must ache, the face must sweat, and yet no leaf or grain is filled by work of ours. The field is tilled and left to grace, that we may reap. Great work is done while we're asleep. When we work well, a Sabbath mood rests on our day and finds it good.
giving life, the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
We are exhausted. Am I right? Like, who's feeling deeply existentially tired? Not just sleep deprived or overworked, but like numb with fatigue that starts somewhere deep in your bones. Am I right? Is it just me? I know we've seen a dramatic drop in the amount of volunteering that folks in our congregation are up for recently. And we all know we're seeing a broad rejection of this society's demand for extreme devotion to work, especially in the realm of caregiving. We need rest. People are leaving the workforce, choosing to work less, refusing to work for low wages and little respect. There is a mass exodus of workers leaving lower wage healthcare jobs, teaching child and elder care and hospitality work. Americans are sick and tired of a work ethic that makes us sick and tired. We need to rest. So many of us also are absolutely soul weary after 2 years of pandemic crisis. Trauma does not just injure our feelings. It saps our bodies of energy as well. It's exhausting to live through trauma, and fatigue is one of its symptoms. If you've ever experienced a short-term trauma, a car accident or an assault, you know that our bodies protect us in that moment of crisis with a burst of adrenaline, a stiffening of muscles in preparation to run or fight or brace for impact, a hyper-focus on survival. And you know that the after effect of that protection is a debilitating tiredness. We've just lived through and continue to live through a major life-threatening crisis lasting over 1.5 years. We are tired. And the fact that many of us are on the other side of panic, the other side of crisis, does not make us less tired. In fact, we humans almost always feel the impact of trauma after the fact rather than in the middle of it. We experience post-traumatic stress because we do the real work of processing in our bodies after an immediate threat has passed. And that work is exhausting. We need rest. Rest is fundamentally why we come to church. Rest is holy. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. It's going to be a Bible-y Sunday for us. Buckle up. Seriously, though, rest is foundational to our whole concept of religious community, as far back as we can trace our spiritual ancestry. We worship together as the antithesis of work. Let me say it again. Worship is meant to be the antithesis of work. The Bible's first mention of the holiness of rest is right there in the creation story. It says that God's work was completed, and so they rested for a day. And it says specifically that the rest was what made the day holy. Readers of the commandments in the book of Exodus are told, "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do work, Neither shall you or your children or your servants nor your animals nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but they rested on the seventh day. Therefore, let the Sabbath day be blessed and made holy. The importance of a Sabbath rest comes up over and over again in Jewish and Christian religious scripture. A holy rest central to the practice of faith, of every faith that has evolved out of these texts. But again and again, the wisdom of these writings reminds us that rest is not just a discipline, a habit, a rule to follow, but something to enjoy, a gift for us, a blessing. The book of Isaiah tells its readers to call the Sabbath a delight. Centuries later, the gospel writers tell us Jesus kept the Sabbath and went to synagogue to pray every seventh day, but they also show him violating some of the stricter laws of rest by healing people, work, on the Sabbath, by picking food to eat, that's work, rather than allowing his followers to go hungry. And he catches some heat from religious authorities for this, but he sassily quotes scripture at them. I love sassy Jesus. He says, God desires mercy and not sacrifice, again from Isaiah. Here we have the framing of rest again as merciful. It's delightful. It's joyful. It is meant to be a blessing. And it isn't just these sources of wisdom that call us into the gift of rest. This right now is the season when the earth is teaching us how to slow down, dig deep, press pause. The days are growing slim and the nights are lengthening. We awaken to ever colder mornings, although not as cold as they used to be. The trees are going to sleep. Geese are flying away south overhead, and all manner of creatures are fattening up for a long winter's nap. The harvest has been reaped, and now is the time of rest. Creatures who refuse to rest in the winter don't survive it. A tree who kept its leaves would topple under the weight of winter snows. A bear or a bee who refused to hibernate would freeze. But we humans are too often held captive by the false idol of work. We are too often held captive by the false idol of work and of busyness. Over and over throughout the Bible, when the people of God are chastised, the Sabbath always comes up. They have forgotten to keep it holy. They've profaned the Sabbath with work. They have desecrated the sacred time that is meant to belong to God. Because in these scriptures, God needs rest too. This is how central rest is to our spiritual tradition, or at least how central it ought to be. I wonder what condemnations a modern Isaiah or Jeremiah or Jesus would say about how holy we keep our times of rest, about whether we keep them at all. And actually, there is a modern-day prophet who is preaching the gospel of radical rest. Her name is Pastor Tricia Hersey, and she founded the NAP ministry in Georgia in 2016. It is what it sounds like it might be, a ministry of collective napping, immersive rest. Their motto is "Rest is resistance," because in a culture where the grind is glorified, of course it is. And Hersey's perspective, from her perspective as a Black womanist liberation theologian whose ancestors were trafficked to this country for the purpose of forced work, of course rest is resistance. I want to share some of her prophetic words with you. She writes this: I don't have any profound new wisdom that hasn't already been in our culture. There is always ancient knowledge that we have forgotten. The crisis of this peculiar virus is sending us into a dizzying tailspin of grinding in the digital realm. We are indeed interconnected and intertwined. I have noticed this tendency in our culture to skip steps during trauma. We jump right into getting it right, getting it over it immediately, leaving no space for the precious ritual of grief, rest, and lament. In our minds, there is no time for stopping to process, even in a global pandemic that has killed millions. We want to remain in the way it always was, super productive and focused on doing, even while systems around us are failing and slowing down. The truth is, we will never go back to normal or regular after this crisis is contained, and for that I am grateful and inspired. Our normal and regular pace was never meant for humans, but instead a machine-level pace fueled by capitalism's call to create wealth by any means necessary. I am curious now and always by what can be imagined during a true pause. Will we answer the call to collectively stop, to dream, daydream, cultivate silence, and rest? I believe we have a magical opportunity to stop. There is power in our rest and in our ability to slow down for the sake of collective healing and mourning. It's time to rest. That's what Pastor Hershey preaches, and I understand. Rest is not an easy spiritual practice to claim in our time, is it? It is so hard to set aside time that is for nothing at all but rest, because we live in a culture that demands exactly the opposite. It is so hard to answer the question Hershey poses to her congregants: how will you be useless today? How will you be useless today? We have inherited an American ethic of productivity that frames work as wholesome, moral, and good, and rest as lazy and degenerate. But our spiritual ancestors tell us otherwise. Our modern prophets are telling us otherwise. Our bodies tell us otherwise. The wisdom of the earth preaches otherwise. Rest is radical. Rest is resistance to domination. Rest is reclaiming our time, reclaiming divine time. And maybe that's why divinity has to shout through the ages in the birds and bees and bears and trees, in voices of the prophets of old, and preaching right now that rest is a blessing, a delight. We need rest. We need to rest without shame or guilt about doing so. Our rest is a prayer of gratitude to the universe. Our rest says to the abundance of the cosmos, thank you, I have everything I need. Now I can be still. Our rest is holy, and we need to rest. But how the hell can we? I hear your inner voices shouting that because, trust me, mine is too. It was shouting that as I altogether too ironically wrote this sermon on holy rest while recovering from a cold, juggling the work of childcare with my spouse, because in the middle of the exodus from care labor, we cannot find a babysitter, and jumping in and out of a seemingly endless stream of Zoom meetings. How do we rest when work is relentless? And actually, I think confronting what our inner voice has to say about rest and about work is probably the first step here. We are all trained by a culture of rampant capitalism in the ethos that work is admirable and laziness is a sin. So we need to challenge the source of any impulse in us to categorize rest as wrong. We need to teach our inner voice that laziness doesn't exist. Taking rest when rest is needed, taking rest as regular and immovable spiritual practice is good. Refusing work when it is time for rest is not immoral. God Himself did it. We need to critically examine the internal value we assign to things like efficiency, productivity, hustle, and labor, and the stigma we place on things like idleness, slowness, uselessness. We can teach our inner voice to ask instead, how can I be useless today? Because our own worth is not, was never tied to our work. We are not good or whole or worthy because of our productivity or usefulness. We are worthy, good, and whole just the way we are, as a quality of our being and not our doing. Also, we can lean into spiritual practices that feel restful. I hope our Sunday worship is one for you. Maybe walking in the quiet woods is also. Maybe yoga or reading or knitting or baking bread are the restful practices to set aside sacred time for. Maybe it is literally taking a nap, going to bed, getting the rest you need and deserve. We can also, having retrained our inner voices, say no to work. Not all work, probably, but say no to work that robs us of regular and holy rest. We can say no to work for its own sake, for the sake of a system of labor that has demonstrated very clearly in the last year and a half that it will not ever value our rest or even our lives over our work. And don't come for me, board members, you can say no to church work. Frankly, you already are, and it's okay. It's okay. Church is first and foremost a place of rest. You can prioritize your own rest here. From the very first conception of a Sabbath, worship is meant to be the opposite of work. We are all tired. We need to rest. It might mean we have to do less church programming or do things differently in order to take care of our common need for rest. But the church is here for a purpose, and its purpose, first and foremost, is a place of rest. Of all places, we need to put rest first here. And having said all this, I want to warn us against adopting the wolf in sheep's clothing that is the wellness industry's consumption under the guise of care. Rest is not a product we have to buy or a treat we earn by working. The blessing of a real biblical Sabbath is the gift of a boundary, of boundaries on our time, setting aside a day, an entire day and night, for rest and nothing else. It is a time for deep and spiritual rest, not mindless media or product consumption, not for being home but checking our email every hour, not for leaning on the faith in our own labor to sustain us, but for leaning on grace to carry us. A Sabbath is sacred, boundaried time, and it is those boundaries that are our gift. Those walls around houses of rest are a gift we can accept, we can implement, so that nothing, not even ourselves, can rob us of our holy rest. When we cross the threshold into the boundaried space of rest, we are safe there. Our rest is safe. Indeed, may nothing evil cross that door. This boundary underlines the divine promise that if there is a time for planting, there must be a time for reaping. Rest is our holy harvest. And to glean it in these times is a radical rejection of the culture that asks us to work without ceasing. The culture that asked us to get back to normal as fast as possible with no regard for the sanctity of life, all for the sake of the economy, by which we know they mean rich people's pocketbooks. To claim the sacredness of rest in this context is a powerful undermining of what that system of domination and control has done. And that, my friends, is why it has always been the reason we come to church. May it always be so. Let us rest. I offer these words from Pastor Tricia Hersey as a benediction. May a space to daydream and slow down open to you. May you realize the power of taking rest, since no one will give it to you. This is why rest is a resistance. And I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, to join us in humming or swaying to our closing hymn in the Teal Hymnal, number 1045, There is a Balm in Gilead.
There is a balm in Gilead
words for extinguishing the chalice, if you know them. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We don't have any food or drink this morning, but we invite you to stay and socialize with one another with masks on. It's also a lovely day outside if you want to take that socialization out to the porch. And our folks who are joining us on Zoom, I think our lovely hosts can put you into breakout rooms for your coffee hour, where at home you can drink all the coffee you like.